So welcome. This is Rise, 12 key elements to align with who you're here to be, with your soul purpose, whatever you want to put at the end of that, piece. It doesn't really matter exactly the specific name. The key is that I am wanting to help you and show you, basic ways that we can really come in. This is, fundamental stuff, but it also is kind of important stuff, and it's also mystical stuff. So it's a combination of both the spiritual and the human aspects of really, owning your truth, your power, and your joy. So I'll begin. I'm going to share my screen. So welcome to Rise, 12 key elements to align with your soul purpose. And as I said, that each month since January, I've been offering this free class. It's the fourth Monday of each month. It'll be the third Monday in December. And basically, we're going to explore and delve deeper into one of those key elements. And in each of these classes, I'm offering, as well as the overview, kind of trying to, obviously I'm talking to a whole bunch of people, so it's not like I'm giving anybody a specific reading, but insights about your inherent gifts and your purpose, guidelines for coming back into alignment, and tools to implement during your spiritual unfoldment. I have been recording them, and I will continue to record them as long as I don't forget. And you can find those recordings. So if you've missed any of the previous 5 classes, you can go to my website, that's veronicalee.tv, and click on the Learn and go to Classes, and you will see that class that has the link, and it'll take you to a page with all of the resources. Each of the classes, I will also in the chat be sharing with you resources, so some articles that really complement the topic, as well as audios and videos, so that however you like to learn, there's plenty of information. Everything's free. It's just for you to look at, play with, explore. My name is Veronica Lee. I had a metaphysical upbringing, and that was really strange back in the, 60s and 70s. My mom discovered metaphysics when she was a teen, and she really, basically that was my foundation. So I went with her to her, our so-called family psychic, and we would do all kinds of strange things like holding our hands over people. I was taught how to visualize myself getting well. I was taught everybody is psychic. I was taught, we create our reality, and these basic principles of metaphysics. So that was my upbringing. And I really, really, really wanted to be more normal, because it was a little bit hard, and I felt a little, different than the other kids. And enjoyed metaphysics all the way through teenhood. And then in some ways it was like, yeah, nobody really gets me. It'd be fine just to be a normal person. And I never gave up what I believed in, but I really tried to be more normal in, other ways. But nonetheless, life circumstances always take you to where you need to be. Your soul is like, come back here. So I, through crisis, ended up coming to this work, and I've been working as an Akashic Records intuitive for the past 17 years. And I, naturally, we're all intuitive. This is what we're going to talk about tonight. But it does help to have had that foundation. So a lot of times people think, oh, when did you know you had this gift? I'm like, oh, I was taught we all have this gift. So it's not whether or not if, it's what and how well do you practice, right? Anyway, so I've been, doing this work, professionally for 17 years, and then teaching people how to access their own records, how to work, and my mom and I together would teach an intuitive skills class. I was sharing at the beginning of this with Kim that we would do it here in my office in person. And then after several years, we started doing it online so we can reach more international clients. I have a lot of clients over in the UK. I've been writing for Om Times since about 2012, and giving talks and such. I consider myself a transformational that's a mouthful, transformational visionary, and my intention is to empower others. I'm a mother of 4 young adults, and I was widowed in 2018. And unfortunately, not only did I lose my husband, but 10 days later, I lost my mom. So it was a very intense year. And yet, it is what we are working through in this human life, is to experience all the realness. These are ways to contact me. You can find me on Facebook and all of these social medias. All right. So what we're going to talk about today, and of course, I'll be taking time for questions and such. I do want this to be a place where you feel like you're not just being spoken to, but that you can kind of get your questions answered and gain some depth and some, something that you can walk away with. The 12 key elements to align with your soul purpose, these are not exclusive. These are just sort of directional and a way to kind of really come in, are outlined. And I use the acronym RISE. And so I used 3 R's, 3 I's, 3 S's, and 3 E's. And because part of it is, this is not just like, oh yeah, we just do this. It's really a process, right? So we're going to rise. It's going to take some time to do this, right? And a lot of times what we find is it's not even a linear process. For many of us, it's more like a spiral. We make some progress and we move, and then we kind of come back to things. We're revisiting things that we thought we had cleared, and what we recognize is that we're just, going deeper or clearing it even more. So it is, a process. It's a journey. To go through these 12 elements, they are: recognize your true self. And again, 1 through 5, I've already covered this year, so you can find those in the archives there. Recognize your true self. You are divine. You are worthy. You are whole. Remember your purpose. Why did you incarnate specifically, but also holistically, right? You incarnated to experience life. If you are divine and you wanted to experience it all, as the infinite does, it's like, why not? Why not have this experience and be this person and that person and explore? Renew your commitment. So once you have a sense of who you are and what your purpose is, it's like, okay, now I'm going to renew this. I'm going to step into this and say yes to what I'm here to do and be. And then you need to instigate some kind of change, right? And that's always a little bit uncomfortable, but at the same time, it can also be really exciting. So it's that kind of meeting that commitment with some action. And at the same time, or before, after, whichever, you want to illuminate your intentions. And that's what we covered last month. And clearly, as we set our intentions, some people, I did talk a lot about manifesting last time, will often believe that it's a matter of just, having the right affirmations, saying the right words, having the right so-called mindset. What I spoke to and really kind of take a little deeper is that if the intention is to really be who you are here to be, and to let divine move through you and as you, it's a little more challenging, but it also is really, really clear that you are now walking in trust, right? It's a different energy than, I want the house, I want it to look this way, and and writing out an order. So, just kind of taking a look at that from a different perspective. Tonight, we're going to speak about, implement your intuition. That's another key element, obviously, but we're going to go deep into this. And then for the rest of the year, we'll hit 1 a month, but the other 6 elements are: separate from unsupportive patterns. That does include people, not always easy. And it doesn't mean you have to ace anybody out of your life and, X them out of your life, whatever the word is, the term is, but it's like, finding things that are no longer resonant, and then being clear that you don't want that in your life anymore. And then, of course, when you start to move away from things, it's important to start to find ways to support yourself. So seeking support and surrounding yourself is important. And then it's like, okay, what's your next step? Well, you need to show up and step out. So, your inner work is for you, yes, But it's also, for the most part, most of us didn't just come here to enjoy our own lives. We came to really transform all that is going on collectively and to shift our consciousness and co-create our reality, right? We're co-creating a whole new way of being in the world. And so that's not going to necessarily happen if you're hiding still. So it's really showing up with your gifts, with who you are, with your high vibration, with your heart. And then to embody and empower not just yourself, but others, and to continue to evolve your consciousness, and then to enjoy life and be you. All right, so this is what we're going to cover tonight, and I'm going to go through each of those. If you have a question, you can absolutely raise your hand. I'm so not great at trying to manage the Zoom aspect of it and, do both. So if I don't see you raising your hand, you can definitely unmute yourself and say, excuse me. But I do want to allow for questions as we go, but also to recognize that it's a little tricky for me to go up in the ethers, and because I really am essentially channeling this information. It's like, I've been doing this a long time, and I never know exactly what I'm going to say. And so I just hold space for whatever is to come through. And really it is me. It's not like I'm channeling something bigger, but we are that, which we are, right? And so it's not always eloquent. I will do my best to not speak so quickly, to let it come through. And at the same time, to allow for that place of pause and questions. If you find anything you need to know, clarity, we can go there. Okay. So the first thing about our intuition and implementing it is you need to recognize what you already use. So if you could, for a moment, just take a deep breath, kind of go inward. Oh, I think I usually start with a little meditation. Oh, well, I forgot that part. That's okay. But we can do it now. So just take a deep breath, bring your awareness and your attention inward, and just see where that attention goes. Is it going all the way to the belly? Is it sort of spinning in the head a little bit? And then you can just inwardly ask yourself, and maybe you already know the answer, what part of my intuition am I already using? And just see what that very first thing is that comes to you. And I'd be happy if you wanted to share that in the chat, and we can just see what types of things that you already use in terms of your intuition. And sometimes you can use really simple words. You can, say, I just know things. You don't have to say, oh, I'm very claircognizant. You can just say, I get little tinglies on my skin, right? So if I were to, so telepathy. So Jill, how many parts? There's like really infinite, right? We're infinite beings. We have, let's say 5 senses. And for each of those senses, if you were to imagine them as sort of a metaphysical sense, in other words, it's like meta means beyond. So if you're a visual learner, then you might have a strong clairvoyance, the ability to see clearly, right? So those are the types of things that you can easily name, right? Our 5 senses going beyond. So clairaudience, hearing, claircognizance, that knowing. But there are more than that. And so, just kind of recognizing where your intuition already comes together. Smell, I love it. Yes, clairgustance, I think is what it's called. So one of the things that some people may not think about, that a lot of oftentimes women have, but doesn't mean men don't have it at all. It just means, but there's this ability to really like see relationships, see patterns, and see and kind of see people, but it's almost like an empathy, but it doesn't mean you feel everything. It's just seeing how relationships go, seeing patterns, right? That's another, I don't even know what that's called, but that's another one. So it may not be, oh, I had this intuitive hit and I know this. It's more just this almost like observer kind of a piece, right? So there are other things that we may not think of in terms of our five senses. So I'm going to go through what some of those are and just sort of give you ideas about what might be coming up for you or that you might already be using. So claircognizance, that's clear knowing, right? That is usually where I am strongest. It's just, I just know what I know. I don't know how I know, but I don't really care. I just know it, right? Clairaudience, listening, hearing. So what'll happen is, as I'm getting information, I can sometimes actually hear words, and it won't be loud. It won't be, but it'll be like a sentence. And it's like, oh, that's what I have to say, right? It's this sentence or maybe a specific word, and it's just coming in so loudly. And, maybe it's claircognizance, but no, it's really coming in. It's like a sentence. It's a word. It's being repeated. So I'm hearing that even if it's internally. There's clairvoyance, which is clear seeing. And again, when my mom and I would teach our intuitive skills classes together, some people think of clairvoyance as seeing actual things, right? So if you see an aura, right? Some people will think, oh, I can literally see a red aura. Or maybe you sense a red aura, but your eyes don't actually see it. So it's sort of like daydreaming or dreaming, right? So it isn't always super physical, but it's still clairvoyance because you're getting an image or a picture, right? So again, just widening that idea of the clairvoyance. Clairsentience is feeling, right? People will say, oh, I got a chill, or I got goosebumps, or sometimes it's like, oh, I got a knot in my stomach, right? So then we can kind of pair that a little bit with those, what we call an empath, or another term people are using is highly sensitive, persons, right? So this empathy is, actually, just like my mom taught us that we're all intuitive, we've heard that all children are naturally empathetic. Like if one baby cries, the other one will start crying out of empathy, right? And so, yes, your empathy might be so in tune to feelings, potentially likely negative feelings. Like if somebody's really down and they're in your presence, you suddenly start to feel really down, right? So there are those empaths that are just so open, which we can learn how to shield and such. And then there's the other kind of empath, which can feel situations, but can learn to stay in neutrality. Does that make sense? So it's the empathy, but without the heaviness of it. So it doesn't mean you're not an empath just because you're not like laying in bed and you can't move because somebody else is depressed or the whole world is, falling apart. So just clarifying that, right? Clairguscience, that's that ability to smell. And so it would be paying attention. And I can't remember which one. I do have them all listed. In fact, I'll include that in the resources. If you've signed up for my mailing list, which I think most of you are on, part of what you get as a thank you gift is my Awaken Your Intuition e-booklet. And that lists all of these. So anyway, so that's another area. Generally speaking, whatever you do in the real world is going to be your heightened claircognizance. Your heightened intuitive gift, right? And for me, it is claircognizance. It's like I just was able to see patterns and just sort of know things, but I didn't really know I knew, right? And of course, there's channeling, there's speaking with people on the other side. So a lot of different aspects of what you already use. So any questions about that one aspect? Recognize what you already use before I go on. You can raise your hand or just unmute yourself if there's anything. Okay, I can go on. All right. So then once you have a sense of what you already use, the next step is to develop your intuition further. That doesn't mean you have to become a practicing intuitive. And if you want to, yay, you can absolutely do this, right? Get paid for it. The nice thing about getting paid for it is that it sets more boundaries, right? Because now it's like, I'm not going to just give out information to anybody who's like, what do you think about this? I'm going to say, okay, here's our time, here's our appointment, here's the time slot. and also set boundaries emotionally. So no, I'm not going to try to fix your problems or lean in. It's like there's a professionalism there. But that doesn't mean that with people that I'm friends with or that I love or whatever, that I'm not going to naturally use my gifts of just seeing and knowing things, not to be sneaky and get in there and tell them what I think they should do. It's more or less like, oh, here's me being me. Here's me being me that has this gift of, claircognizance and seeing and being an observer. With your developing of your intuition further, you get to decide what that looks like, right? There are so many places you can do this. You can read books, you can take online classes, you can practice with a friend. When I was a kid, because this is how we were taught, my cousins and I would play like, let's read minds. And we would like, okay, let's, think of a number. And then the other person would guess it, right? I have a funny story where I teach at a school. I teach in a Waldorf school where my kids went, and I teach 2 half days a week, and I teach them, the kids, how to knit and sew. And one time, one of the children, I think his mom might have come to me for a session. I don't remember specifically, but he said something like, you read minds, or, something. I was like, no, I don't exactly read minds. And of course he was only in 6th grade, and he's like, well, what number am I thinking? And I said 7. He's like, oh, he was just like, and I was just kidding. I wasn't really reading his mind. I just threw out a number, but I was right, obviously. And he thought that was pretty fun. So yes, I jokingly tell people, I don't want to know what's in your mind. But what I do know is I know exactly what people want. I know exactly what they're feeling, right? So I may not know the story in their head. I can hear the story to some degree, but not their specific mind, what they're thinking in that moment. But I just know you. I just know you on a soul level. It's like, oh, here's what you're wanting. Here's what your dreams are. Here's what your blocks are. Here's what you're afraid of. That's just what I know. And I don't do it, without people's permission, right? And that's the other good thing about getting paid, is that it helps set boundaries in that way. But however that looks like for practicing, there are ways you can set your intention to connect with, your higher self. Let's say you can access the Akashic records. That's another way to, up the level of your intuitive wisdom and knowing and connection. So many ways. If there's a class that interests you, go take it, right? My mom was very interested in astrology when I was a kid. And so I knew all the signs, I knew their dates, I knew, their general personalities, et cetera. And she was also really interested in tarot. And I never really got into tarot. But one of the things with the divination tools, which is really fun, if you have any kind of card, if it comes with a book, you can literally pull a card, maybe ask a question, however you want to do it, or just look at the card. It's best if you have an intention. I will say that, because you can pull the card and then just ask yourself, what does this card mean? But if you have a question and you pull the card, it's like, now what does this card mean, right? And then you can start to maybe feel into the insights of what this card's telling you. It doesn't matter what the card have words on it or not. Then you can go and read the book that's accompanying it and see how well it matches. That's another way to test yourself. And so you don't even need a partner for that. So lots of ways to develop your intuition so that it becomes, just, these are gifts we came in with. It's like, imagine if you came into a world and nobody believed that we were allowed to smell. And so it was like, no, we don't smell that. Nobody smells. That's impossible to smell. And you're like, but I'm smelling something. And they're like, nope, can't smell, right? That's how integrated our scent is, because we know that it's possible. But with our intuitive senses, we've been told from the time we were little, you don't know what you know. You don't see what you see. You don't hear what you hear. There's no ghosts in the room, whatever the story is, right? And so that's shut down because everybody around you doesn't believe it. And what you'll see is a lot of times children come in very open, and then they're being taught to not honor that. And so it gets tucked away. So any questions about developing your intuitive gifts? Anything that you want to, ideas that you thought, oh, maybe I could do this. So again, you can either unmute yourself or even share it in the chat. Or if you have a question, I'd be happy to answer it. Okay. Now we're going to go on to learning to let it, your intuition, and the universe guide you. Some people have sort of this misconception that once you develop your intuitive gifts, all's going to be well. And I can attest to the fact that I've been intuitive my whole life, have been raised with metaphysics, have been, taught all these things. My life did not go well all the time, right? And just because I could so-called see things, or I could have a sense of things, or I can look at specific things, that doesn't mean that I'm not here on some kind of soul journey that I just need to experience, regardless of how much I so-called know. I had a woman one time come to me, and she really wanted to develop her intuition because she kept getting into relationships where she'd find out the guy was cheating on her. And this was a repetitive pattern. And so she thought, well, if I develop my intuition, then I'll know if he's going to cheat on me. And I thought, okay. And my mom, as I was sharing this with my mom, I'm like, she's, that just like, that's such a funny way to look at it. I was just like, okay, how, that she had this like idea that she'd be able to see something, when usually the thing you're most emotionally attached to is the hardest thing to see, right? But anyway, my mom's like, she is using her intuition. That's how she's picking these guys, right? Because what's happened is that you are, operating unconsciously from this part of your body that's a vibration or a wound, and that's what's attracting into your life. Okay, I don't want to go a lot into manifesting, but the point is just because you've developed your intuition doesn't mean that life isn't going to surprise you or happen to you. So one of the articles I included is called Psychic Security, ? Why being intuitive doesn't necessarily I don't know exactly what I named it, but why it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be happy, and that it doesn't ensure happiness and things not happening, right? But it can still guide you to make easier, more aligned choices. It could guide you to knowing your next step. It could guide you to knowing energetically, for example, I want my kids, to know how to be safe in the world. So what do we teach our children? It's like, don't talk to strangers or something like that. But there's something else where, what if it's not a stranger? What if it's somebody else? I want them to feel in their body if this person feels safe. And so one thing that one of my children said once is we called it the uh-oh feeling, right? It's like when you have that uh-oh feeling, it's like you want to pay attention to that. And, my daughter at the time said, oh, it's kind of like that feeling you get when you go into those little stores where the gas stations are, and sometimes they have that uh-oh feeling, right? It's like, we want to get in and out and pay and, whatever. So whatever that is that you use has already been serving you. And by developing it further, it's just going to serve you more, right? So just kind of looking at that bigger picture doesn't mean life's going to be perfect and that you're going to know for sure. If I could have picked the lottery numbers, I would have, or if I could have predicted X, Y, or Z, right? That kind of thing. Two stories. One is I gave birth to twins with about 5 hours notice. I didn't know I was carrying twins, right? Here I am, an intuitive, and everybody around me kept saying, you're really big. And I kept telling my midwives, I'm really big. And they kept saying, oh, it's because it's your third. And, everything just gets loose and you get really big. And then my water broke early, and lo and behold, there were 2 of them. So duh, right? And then the other, to look at it a different way, when my husband was experiencing a lot of these determined, we couldn't figure out what was going on. He had all these symptoms and we couldn't figure it out. And he was going to the doctor and they were testing him for this and that. And finally I said, do you want me to look at it psychically? Because I'm not going to do that unless he wants me to. And he said, sure. And then I looked at him and I'm like, oh my gosh, you don't want to be here anymore. And he broke down. It was just too hard. And he ended up getting what we found out he had was Lou Gehrig's disease, which is not curable, right? And so it's like, that sucks to be able to see that, let's say, or it wasn't seeing him dying. It was more seeing energetically that he was done. He didn't want to do this or whatever. Right. So yeah, it can be tricky and it can be scary and it can take you to places that you may not want to know. But for the most part, your intuition is yours to use the way you want to use it. So yes, some people will have like, dead people knocking on their head and saying, hey, I want to tell you something. It's like, what, but you still have the right to say, no, I don't want to talk to you right now. I don't want to, right. Whatever that is, you get to decide. You get to have a sense of what works. And if it's something alarming, it's usually because it needs to be. It's like, oh, I'm suddenly feeling something, right? So it's allowing it to navigate with you through life, allowing it to help you, but it's not here to control you and that you are, just a victim to way too much information, right? So any questions about that? Any questions about the next, this part, the learn to let your intuition and the universe guide you? All righty. And now this next one is a little bit interesting because it sort of does, let's say, rub up against that idea that we are creating our reality, or that we got information and we know something, we just know something, right? It's still your perceptions, right? So if you think of your physical senses, and you and another friend or 5 friends are going to sit around and you're going to watch an incident, you're looking at something, and maybe one's going, look how blue that water is. And somebody else is going, oh, that water's looking pretty green to me today. And the other one's going, oh, look how gray that water is, right? We can see the exact same thing and have completely different perceptions. That's the joy. That's the coolness. That's the uniqueness, right? So when my mom and I would teach our intuitive skills classes, and we'd have, 10 people or whatever in a circle, and maybe one person asks a question and everybody else is giving their input, who's right? First of all, it's about practicing, in a class, but even so, it's perceptions, right? And it's also possibilities. So for example, if something is coming in so strongly, then it's important to pay attention, but that doesn't mean it's going to play out the way you think it is, or that you have to be right no matter what. You don't have to attach yourself to it, but you can start to learn how much weight to give it. That's what I want to say. It's like, if something is really strong and saying, you've got to do this, you've got to do this, you've got to do this, and you start going the other way, likely life's going to pull you back and say, no, we said you've got to do this, right? Whatever it is. And at the same time, if you have a sense of something, then it might be, I wonder if this is going to play itself out. I wonder what's going to happen. And maybe out of the 5 or 6 things that over the past several months, you've been testing this, you've been playing with this, maybe out of those things, you'll notice that one of those things didn't happen, but the rest of them did, right? And it's like, wow. One of the things that when we talk about, let's say, the future specifically, is that, nothing is written in stone. There may be signposts or intentions that before we were born, we had the intention we wanted something to, work out a certain way, or we wanted to learn a certain lesson, or we wanted to have a certain experience, or we wanted to meet certain people. Those were like soul intentions before we incarnated. And likely we're going to hit those, let's say, guideposts along the way. But that doesn't mean we have to. And it doesn't mean that we can't that we won't make other choices, right? So it's sort of looking at the whole of this intuitive experience as possibilities as well, right? It's not like, oh, this is carved in stone. So when I speak to people, there are different ways people can be intuitive and how they speak in a reading. But for me personally, when I speak to people, I do say, here's what your patterning is. Here's what I'm hearing. Here's what's going on. And I'm pretty clear about it because I've been doing it so long, and it just feels very, straightforward. And I'm also speaking to them on a soul level. And if they say, oh yeah, that's totally most people say you're spot on to me. But there'll be times where like, oh, I don't quite understand this, or I'm not seeing this. Like, okay, so I'll listen a little bit more. It's like, oh, here's how I want to explain it to you. Here's what here's how I can express it a little bit differently, that it makes more sense, perhaps. And then they'll often go, oh, okay, yeah, now I understand what you're seeing. And it might be that I was getting a picture or a sentence and I'm trying to figure out where it fits in. So either way, what I'm receiving are my perceptions. And then it's up to me to try to convey that, right? And that's going to be my part as a reader, and it's going to be the other person in relationship because that's going to be their perceptions, right? They're going to have maybe a different perception of their self that I'm seeing differently, but also what I'm saying to them, they're going to perceive in a certain way. So we're always talking about perceptions. I had a client one time who said that I was looking at her, and I don't remember what exactly, but I basically said something about, that she wasn't very spontaneous. And she said, oh no, I'm very spontaneous. She said, when my wife and I, she goes, sometimes I'll just plan something and then I'll be like, hey, and I'll tell my wife, we're going to go to the beach and we're going to do this and that, da, da, da. And I'm like, that's not spontaneous. That's you planning the spontaneous event. And then she went, oh, and it's like, what if your wife planned something spontaneous? How does that jar your system? And she's like, oh, so she recognized that her perception of herself was she was spontaneous. And I was hearing this information that she struggled with that. And it wasn't that I'm right and she's wrong. It's that our perceptions, and it was a matter of conveying that. So I was sharing about the perceptions part, and that, that sometimes people's perceptions are going to be very different. And so it's kind of one of those things that where even if you're getting information, that doesn't mean that somebody, let's say you're practicing with people, that they're going to get something different. And what's nice is if you do it in groups, then what you can start to learn is that we're all having different perceptions, but we can all still in some way be right. One of the fun things about teaching intuitive skills with my mom is that she and I did things and saw things very differently. And what that did is it helped the students go, oh, wow, they're coming at it different ways, and they still are both right in their own ways, right? It's like they're looking at different parts, right? So it's like if you ask your friends for advice, they're going to give you all kinds of advice. Some of them you can go, that doesn't fit at all. And maybe 3 or 4, it'll match, it'll fit, it'll feel good. And now it's just up to you to kind of blend them. So, just because you may be so-called wrong in your intuitive perception doesn't mean there's something wrong with you, or that your perception isn't good, or that maybe you just missed it sometimes. Again, if we think of any of our other senses, we might think, oh, I heard one time, I swear I heard a baby crying, and I was just like, oh my gosh, there's a child out in the woods. I better go run out in the woods, which I didn't quite do. I opened the door and looked, and I realized that that's what a cougar sounds like. That there were actually some mating cougars in my yard, and I didn't realize that they sounded like a baby crying, right? So we can often mishear things and think it's something else, whatever they are. And then I will end with keeping things playful. And again, tonight was a great demonstration of, this like, okay, how do we just kind of roll with this, playfulness? Now, one of the things that is hard, let's say you decide you want to do this for a business. This is like, yeah, I really want to pursue this. Now you have somebody paying you, right? And then it's going to be like, oh my gosh, I have to be right. There's, they're paying me to be right, or whatever the story is that we tell ourselves, right? And so that'll often make us feel really confined or stressed. And anytime we're under stress, our senses do start to get diminished, whatever those senses are, right? It's like if you're stressed and you're having an argument with, a family member, how you hear them is going to be very different than if you're not stressed, right? And the same is true that if you're stressed about, being right for your clients and you got to give them their accurate information, it can, suppress your intuitive insights. So as long as we can kind of keep things playful, it makes it easier to meet those questions, because a lot of times when our perceptions come in, we aren't sure. And so there's questions there. And so if you approach it with more of a curiosity and questions like, okay, what's going on here? Then it opens up even more. I will add the resources, which are articles. I have so many articles on my website. So the article is called Psychic Security, Why Intuitive Insights Don't Ensure Accuracy and Joy. That kind of gives you, or joy, that can give you some things to read. And then I have a video, and that was the one I was thinking of when I was thinking of sharing this just now. And the video talks is on YouTube, and it's developing your intuition and how to kind of play with energy and divination cards, just again for this practice. And I love the word play. It's like keeping it light, keeping it playful, because as soon as we get kind of, again, constricted, then it makes it much harder, and we take ourselves too seriously, and then we, it just makes it much more stressful than it is fun. So then I'll finish by sharing any questions about anything so far. We're almost at the close. All right, so any questions, you can raise your hand or just type anything if there's anything coming up. Okay, so the next pre-class, and I will change things up in terms of the signing up so that we don't have this and letting people in. So next time you'll probably want to come in a little earlier, so I have time to let people in. And maybe I'll, between now and then, maybe get a friend or a child. I have 4 kids, 4 adult children, to be a facilitator for me. So that can help me kind of go back and forth between all of these things, because it can be a little tricky. Just because, again, it's like when I work psychic fairs, even I'm just up in the ethers giving information, then I got to come back down and be very practical about checking time and all of that stuff. So, but it's going to be Monday, July 25th. So again, the 4th Monday of the month. And we are going to talk about key element number 7, which is separate from unsupportive patterns. And again, each one is standalone. You can, literally scan that little code right there, and or the little, whatever the thing is called, the little scanner thing, and it'll take you directly to sign up. You can sign up for all of them if you want. I think usually we can only sign up for about 2 months out, a month or 2 for my classes. And then basically that's it. So any questions? I am happy to answer questions if there's anything specific. So it could be general, right? But if you have any questions that are related to your own personal intuition, and you don't mind, me looking at you and giving you information and having other people witness that, I'm also willing to answer that. We just can stay on for just a couple more minutes, and I can support you in that way if there's anything you wanted to ask about. So did all of that make sense? Was there a sense of continuity, understanding, what we're looking at in terms of, owning and stepping into our intuitive gifts? And I think the only thing I didn't really talk about in terms of a greater picture, which I'll just throw in here at the end, is sort of the why, and the why being that you came in to really own all of you. That is part of why you incarnated. You wouldn't be attracted to these types of classes. You wouldn't be, a so-called seeker if you weren't looking for more of yourself. And part of that is going to be gathering these aspects of yourself that expand you, that allow you to experience more of your multidimensionality, and also to empower you to navigate this life with more ease, more grace, and also more joy. And to begin to use these intuitive gifts to be able to see people in their bigger capacity, right? So unlike the person who was like, I want to know if, this next guy that I date is going to be cheating on me, and that's why I want to be intuitive, that's coming at it from really a kind of a fearful place. And if we instead steer intuition to be able to see people at a larger capacity, to see their heart, to see, not to be nosy. Like, I don't do that. I'm not like nosy. My kids, if they ask me a question and they want intuitive insights, then sure, I can do that. I mean, my kids, once they became 18 or when they were younger, I never like, this is what you're going to become. Because I was raised in an intuitive family, it was really hard. We had a family psychic. She's the one that married my husband and I, but she literally like deemed my cousin to be the next psychic in the family. And then it was like, you're going to be this and you're going to be that. And it just really confined her. And I think it was because her mom kept going to our family psychic and was like, it's too much. You don't do that to children. But with my own children, if they've asked me, like, I'm curious about something, and I want some depth. But the thing is, who I am is intuitive. So if they're just going to have a conversation with me, I can, look at that. But one example with one of my children, she was having a health condition. And so once I looked at what that was about, it was like, wow, there's information here that I was surprised about, that I wasn't really, because I was just parenting, I want to parent them and be as honest and authentic as possible. But by opening to these higher realms and to kind of get out of my own way to say, okay, what is she needing to know here about her health conditions? Then we both gained clarity there. So that's the why that I see about, your own intuitive gifts, is you're here to really expand, not just for yourself, but your relationship with other people. And then again, we're co-creating a more congruent and joyful reality together. And I think that having your intuitive gifts, really honored is part of that. So, yeah. So that's my spiel. That's what came through tonight. That's where I will end. If there's anything that you wanted to ask anything about, this would be your last opportunity. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining me. And if you have any questions or follow-up questions, you can always email me. You don't have to ask them here. You can email me at veronicalee@veronicalee.tv, and I'd be happy to, connect and respond to anything that comes up that you didn't think to ask now or you didn't want to ask now. So anyway, have a good rest of your evening, and I'll see you next month. And if you have any questions, again, just let me know. All right. Take care.